Hello friends, and welcome to Ronnie Draws. Tonight, I'll be drawing a motorcycle that's very near and dear to me. It's the SEARS ALLSTATE 175, sold by Sears and Roebuck in mid to late 50s, I think is when they started, and then they carried on all the way through the late 60s. And at one time, this was the best-selling motorcycle in all of America. It beat out Harley Davidson, Indian. Indian was gone by then, but I don't know if you look it up. I forget how they worded it, but it was the best-selling motorcycle for some period of time. They sold more of these than any other bike was sold at the time. And then in the 60s, they made these, and they were black. I like the black ones. They look pretty cool. And then later on, they changed them to where they had different tanks, I think the tank had a more squared off edge to it, and then had fork gators on it. The Allstate 175 and 250, they're both very similar. They had a unique piston design. If you take the head off, you'll see it. It's like a figure 8 where it has a single combustion chamber for both pistons. It's a very loud motorcycle. If you take the baffles out of it, you'll know what I'm talking about. It sounds like thunder. It's louder than any Harley you've ever heard. Brum, 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 brum. When I was growing up, my dad was always restoring these. He knows all about them, every make and model. There's a rare Magneto model that's really hard to find. He's got a few of those. The Scrambler model, I think, was one of the rarest. That was a 250, and I remember restoring one of those with him, too. It's completely different. It has a different frame and everything, but these old 175 and 250s, the frame was like pressed steel, and I don't know, they're pretty fun for what they are. They have a really cool sound and smell to them if you run the right oil in them. They use castor oil, like the castor bean, and it has a really unique smell to them. The 250s were oil injected, and the 175s where you had to pre-mix them, but they both had the same kind of, it was a weird two-stroke sound. It's not like a modern-day two-stroke where it's high and winding. It was more like a low, and then when you give it gas, I don't know, I always felt like it had a slipping clutch, but I think that's just the way they were. They had 10 horsepower. But you could still get one up to highway speeds if you have to. And they all kickstart on the left side, so you'd have to stand and use your right leg. An interesting note about the Allstate, it was made in Graz, Austria, the same place that made Arnold Schwarzenegger. My dad, he was born in the 40s and grew up when these were brand new, so by the time he was 15, I think is when these were first coming out, and him and all his friends had them, and they delivered newspapers throughout Dallas on these and raced them around on the weekends. And he hung out with all the Sears mechanics who worked on the Sears Allstates, obviously, and he learned quite a bit from them. And then he started repairing them himself in his own garage as he got older, and I think when he ran out of room in the garage, he carried them up into the attic, parts and pieces, because there's a story where he came home from school one day and his stepfather was very upset with him because an engine had dropped down through the ceiling, and it was raining oil, as he said, and he called it an oil state. And one of the best racers he talks about was a guy named Johnny Driver, who delivered packages throughout the city on these. He was an older kid. He was a few years older than my dad and his friends, but they all looked up to him. And Johnny Driver would deliver the packages all throughout downtown Dallas, so he was on his Allstate all day long, and it took on a really rough look. The seat came off, so he was using a pillow cushion because he was kind of a poor kid, but he still had a motorcycle. And on the weekends, they'd all go to the races, and sometimes there'd be like sponsored racers who were all fixed up with nice clothes and gear and the boots on, and here'd come Johnny Driver with his Allstate with a pillow cushion for a seat. And Johnny Driver would get out there and beat everyone, and he'd make everyone mad, and then he'd come back the next week and do it again. Well, yeah, he has a lot of Allstate stories, and a lot of trophies from his days in racing them. He used them as hill climbers too. They made pretty good hill climbers because you can actually put one of these, I've done it before, in third or fourth gear from a dead stop and take off. They have a lot of torque to them. And I think you can still even get parts for these over in Austria. They're still made. The company's name is Puch, who made them. SEARS wasn't the manufacturer. They just branded them the Allstate. I think they had a car, maybe even a refrigerator. They called the Allstate. Several items with the Allstate name. And then later on, he would go on to have his own shop where he'd fix these and sell them. So he got to know them really well. And there was a point in time where these were very uncool motorcycles to have. No one wanted them. And he started buying them really cheap from people that didn't want them anymore because obviously motorcycles had advanced to faster, more modern designs. And that's what people wanted. But then later on, you know, everything came back around and people wanted the Allstates, or they at least thought they were cool. But in fact, he used to run ads in the newspaper saying that he bought SEARS Allstate motorcycles, and I'd go with him on some of these adventures, or they'd be like hours away or in other state. And I must say, you got to be careful when you're looking at a SEARS Allstate that's been sitting in the weeds for a while, because what happens, either a squirrel or his evil rodent cousin takes up residence within the side of the frame. There's a door that opens up, and I've seen it happen. My dad got bit by a squirrel, and also, like I said, rats will come running out of there too, maybe even a snake. But that's something you got to watch out for, creatures living within the Allstate frames. It's happened more than once. Another thing you got to watch out for once you get your SEARS Allstate up and running is the seat. You know, some of them will have this one-piece seat like this I'm drawing here, and those are all right. But the rubber ones, and usually the rubber's gone by now. It was like that, I don't know, 30 or 40 years ago. I'm sure by now none of the original seats are still held up that were installed on the bike. But you got to watch out because those will pinch your balls. They got like a spring that runs up through the back of the frame, kind of, and you'll get up underneath the tank there if you're not careful. So you got to watch it. But if you put the big one-piece seat on, they don't have a spring to it, like the one that looks like your ass is just hanging there. That one bounces, has a bounce to it. But it's hard to find somebody that knows how to work on these or knows much about them anymore. So now it's almost a 70-year-old motorcycle. But I drew this for my dad because, like I said, he's a big SEARS Allstate fan since he was a kid, and he still has some of these. He rides around. He's getting too old to ride them, but he really liked this picture when I drew it for him and framed it and gave it to him. So here is the SEARS Allstate 175.
Oh yeah.